Who doesn't love their sci-fi with a little bit of absurdity and humor? I know I do. And if you do too, then stay tuned. We're going to be talking about the Epic Failure Trilogy by Joe Zieja. Hit it.
Welcome. Make yourself comfortable, won't you? I want to tell you a story.
First off, let's get to know the author, Joe Zieja.
The Epic Failure Trilogy is a story about a guy named R. Wilson Rogers who he left the military to become a con man. And then found out he wasn't very good at it. Ended up getting caught and forced back in the military. And then ever since then just sort of tried to avoid work. And it doesn't always work out for him. So I pitched Mechanical Failure as basically this allegory for what the military was like pre 9/11 and then what the military became post 9/11. So the pre 9/11 military ended up being very, very not professional. It was very like whatever. There was a lot of stunts went on, and then there was this thing. Then 9/11 happened, and the military became hyper-professionalized. So I wanted to put someone in a situation where they were in one military, left, and then came back to the other military. So Rogers leaves the very unprofessional military, and then comes back to the hyper-professionalized military and has trouble fitting in. A lot of what's going on in the book is just, the whole trilogy is all about failure. So that's really what like the Epic Failure series is about. It's about things just like never going the way you want it to go. It's about a guy like all he wants to do is relax, and he just keeps getting into situations where it's not relaxing at all. And people keep handing him work. People keep handing him promotions. And the Epic Failure series is basically like a satirization of my experiences in the Air Force, being part of a large and violent government organization. And all the ridiculous things that happened. I'm a satirist. If you're not familiar with like satire as a device, I'm sure you are. But I make fun of stuff to make a point.
He is a quite prolific voice actor. You may recognize his voice from roles such as Fox McCloud from Star Fox Zero and Claude from Fire Emblem, and 64 other voice acting credits to his name. Now, what is the Epic Failure Trilogy? Well, the Epic Failure Trilogy debuted on Saga Press in 2016, Book 1 being Mechanical Failure, Book 2 being Communication Failure, and Book 3, which was released in 2019, called System Failure. Now, I'd come across these books because I had seen Mechanical Failure on the bookshelves at Barnes & Noble one day, and I said, this looks interesting, and the tagline under it, under the title, said, "Please restart your warship." And I thought, that sounds kind of kind of silly. Maybe it's a good humored book. So I bought that book, but then I also looked up the author and found he was a voice actor, and he also narrates the audiobook. And I said, wow, I got to try that out. So I listened to this whole series on audio, and I have obviously a copy of the last book, System Failure, physical copy. But if you want to get to know the author and get to know his range of voice acting, and some of the effects that they do on the audiobook are really fantastic, I would recommend you start there if you want to try this out. Otherwise, read the books. They may not have the same effect. There's a lot of reviews on these on Book 1, Mechanical Failure, that the author may have been trying too hard to be funny. Some people only gave it like 2 stars, 3 stars, saying that the amount of wittiness that are trying to be shoved in each page is too much. And all of these little back-ended jokes just fell flat for them. So maybe it may not translate for you if you're not a big fan of those type of humorous things. A lot of comparisons say Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Terry Pratchett in Space, and those type of things that may fit. I really loved it. I thought it was just enough. Book 1 I thought was silly, and I knew going into it that it would probably a pretty humorous book, and there's plenty of laughs to be had in Book 1. Book 2 and 3, I think he kind of leveled that part out, where it became, our main character got a little bit more serious in this Book 2 and 3, and the humor was just the right amount. It wasn't too excessive, and it wasn't too blatant and annoying. But the plot of the stories were still very engaging and quite serious. That there's this 200-year peace, and now war is kind of coming back to these galaxies, which our main character, R. Wilson Rogers, is stuck in the middle. So on the author's website, it says, the trilogy reflects on his decade of military and government experience with a sense of absurdity and humor only available to someone that has had to fill out his social security number over 17,000 times and who still cannot get the help desk to fix his goddamn computer. That's where these books start. That's the author's blurb about the trilogy. Where yes, he's been in the military, he's been in the Air Force, he's seen all of the crazy shit and the absurd things that happened, and he's kind of adding that into these stories, which is great. And there's a sense of play and there's a sense of satire throughout this whole series, which makes it just kind of a light book, but it's also got the military sci-fi things going into it. There's space battles, there are different warring factions that are going on here. There's like a mega corporation who's seeking to rule the galaxy and the bad guys, and then there's your hapless main character who's trying to just skate through the whole conflicts and shirking all of his responsibilities, but the more that he does that, the more that he gets promoted throughout these books, and it's just kind of hilarious. So book 1 starts off with a 200-year peace, and our main character, R. Wilson Rogers, has been in the military for a while. He hasn't seen any action, so he decides to go off and become a pirate. So he kind of skates off of his military duties. He goes to be pirating throughout the galaxy, but that ends him up being arrested, and while trying to smooth talk his way out of being arrested, gets put back into his military post. I think like a year later, he gets thrown back into the military, but now this peace is over, and people are actually doing like real military things, and he doesn't understand why. He goes, what's going on? There's no war. Why are we even fighting? And he's still in the mode where he can just kind of cruise and skate back while he's leading these battle platoons into war. And it's really just kind of a humorous thing where people take his lack of understanding and his BS to be, you know, this mind-blowing concept of a new approach to things, and therefore thinks he's just this great military leader. And then book 2 starts off with this platoon. Book 2 is called Communication Failure, and which is kind of the inciting incident to the start of this book is quite humorous too. There's a person on his crew who's the zookeeper, but he's also kind of not very intelligent. And this was all caused because he lost hearing in one ear, and they told him to send a message to say one thing, but he construed it to say another thing, which created the series of events in which this war kind of came to a big head. So now he's in full-fledged battle mode in book 2, and the synopsis is pretty short, so let me just read book 2 to you. In a sequel to Mechanical Failure, Captain Rogers, despite his best attempts to do otherwise, has become the acting admiral of the 331st Meriden Fleet. His first task, worrying a lot. The rival Thelicosan fleet, under the influence of bad intelligence, a forbidden romance, and a communication officer with an eardrum injury, is about to break a 200-year-old non-aggression pact. They have offered a vague, easily misinterpreted message, we're invading. Rogers isn't sure, but he thinks that that's probably bad. War is hell, especially when you've forgotten how to fight one. And there's another part of this book, this unrequited love interest, which this book is not a romance at all. There's a part of the book where Rogers is kind of smitten and overly, you know, eyeballs turn into hearts and all that kind of stuff over one of the people on his fleet. And then there's this other person from the rival entity, the Thelicosans, who is just kind of obsessed with Rogers and his commanding tactics. and the middle of the book there, where you get those two kind of together, is hilarious. I loved book 2 and book 3. I think a little bit more than book 1. Book 1 was just kind of an introductory to the character, how he got there. Book 2 was kind of more of the meat and potatoes, and then book 3 is kind of the icing on the meat and potatoes. And book 3 is System Failure. I received a copy from Saga Press. Thank you. I requested this. I had to seek it out and email and pester them to send that to me, so that it wasn't something where they just said, hey, here you go. I asked for this book because I had read the other two on my own free will. This was pre-Booktube, I think. And I saw that book 3 was coming out, and I wanted to seek it out and get it. So book 3 is System Failure, where war is now spreading through the galaxy. It's become abundantly clear that there's an outside force at play in this explosive, new, hilarious installment of the Epic Failure series that reads like Catch-22 meets David Weber. So now the galaxy's been thrown into chaos by breaches of the 200-year peace. What seems like an isolated incident has become an epidemic. In the midst of the chaos, the Thelicosan and the Meridan fleets on their respective borders have come to a sort of tense peace after the events of Book 2, but now it's clear someone wants war, and it's not the free systems of the galaxy. No, it's a mom-and-pop convenience store gone galactic. It's the purveyors of balloons and nachos and supplies for bowling lanes. It's the company that made the droids a large part of the technology that all the free systems are using in their militaries. It's Snaggerdeers, and they want to snag it all. Now, Snaggerdeers throughout the system is kind of like the 7-Eleven through books 1 and 2. You know, for death rays, go to your local Snaggerdeers, but for toilet paper, find it at Snaggerdeers. For your coffee filters, buy it at Snaggerdeers. You get all that kind of thing through through books 1 and 2, and now books 3. It's becoming clear that those things are quite sinister, and these droids that everyone has and are working with have almost malfunctioned and want all of the humans dead. But there's a droid that works with R. Wilson Rogers, our captain, named Deet, and Deet is his sidekick, and Deet has been programmed with a vulgarity filter, so every time he tries to say a vulgarity, it becomes translated into a different speech. And when it on the audiobook, it sounds more like a robotic speech where he's like, this is male bovine excrement, or something like that, when he's trying to say BS. And it replaces that swearing throughout the book, and he does it a lot, and it's quite hilarious. It's just quite humorous to get to get that when he's even aggravated that it happens to the droid, and he gets frustrated at his own expletive censorship, which is pretty great. So if you want some military sci-fi that's not too serious, that's enjoyable, that gets a good laugh out of you, if you like a lot of humor in your sci-fi, something like a John Scalzi, but a little bit more funny to it, try book 1, Mechanical Failure, and just knowing that you may roll your eyes and you may sigh at some of the humor in it, but books 2 and 3, if you like the characters and you like the story and you want more of it, books 2 and 3 really take it up a notch after that. And I would really recommend you check these out on audio. These are on audio by Tantor Media, narrated by the author himself, which is always fantastic. I always find that those are kind of the best audiobooks that you can find. Plus, he's a voice actor, so you know it's going to be good. So that's my take on the Epic Failure Trilogy. I really loved it. I was really glad that I came across these books. I would recommend them to you. If you want just some goofy sci-fi that you know I do, if you like the books that I review on the channel, then, you know, you gotta check this out. Give it a shot. So that's the Epic Failure Trilogy. I hope you check it out. I hope you like it. If you like more of your humorous sci-fi stuff, make sure you subscribe to my channel, because I'll probably be talking a lot more about that silly kind of stuff. But thanks for watching, everybody. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.